Hi, and welcome to Web Piano Academy and to Let's Speak Music. I am Dr. Antonella Di Giulio, and I am a pianist and music theorist and the host of this small interview. In this interview, we will meet Professor Gjerdingen, and we will talk about the training of the child composers in the old conservatories. In the 17th century, an astonishing number of orphaned children overwhelmed the cities. Out of the pity of private citizens, and also thanks to the apathy of the local governments, the system of conservatory was created. The conservatories were taught to house, nurture, and train these children and to give to them a profession. Professor Robert Gjerdingen is a scholar of music theory and music perception, and he is an emeritus professor at Northwestern University. His most influential work focuses on these children and on how they were trained in the old conservatories. Now let's meet Professor Gjerdingen. I read in your book that you make a difference between the conservatories in Italy and the conservatories in France. So what is the main difference?
The Conservatory in Paris, which was the most famous French conservatory, there were many conservatories in the larger cities, and
Right.
Paris was the largest of all, so it had the biggest conservatory and the most famous teachers. But it didn't even begin until 1795, which means that the heyday of the Italian conservatories was before then.
Right.
So in a way, there are some institutional differences, but also it just takes place in a different era. So for the Italian conservatories, the great composers were men like Pergolesi and Jomelli and other Italians, and a little bit later, then Mozart learned how to write in that Italian style. But then in the 19th century, the composers are Beethoven and Berlioz and Chopin and Liszt. And so it's a different repertory. Another difference is that the Italian conservatories were church institutions originally, whereas the French conservatories were government institutions. And so the government was a little less charitable toward the students.
Possibly.
The church took a student in and fed them and clothed them and housed them.
Right.
Whereas the French government paid for your lessons and sometimes gave you a little money for housing, but it wasn't in the conservatory. You had to find your own housing.
Would they start at the same age or not? Not, probably not, right?
Yes, about 10 or 11. If you were very talented. So, for example, Claude Debussy and Maurice Ravel started when they were 10 and 11. But you could start later, and some did. Oftentimes, you could start when you're quite young in a smaller city. And if you were very good, you could transfer to Paris.
Right.
There were more different kinds of classes. For the Italian orphan boys, they got only what they needed to do their job.
Right.
So there really wasn't much in the way of mathematics or science of any kind. In the Paris conservatories, they did have a music history as a subject starting in about 1870 something. And they did have different, a wider range of instruments. Instead of meeting every day, they would meet usually 3 days a week
Mhm.
for a particular class. So there was a little bit more distance. What we say sometimes is that there's a Latin phrase in loco parentis, which means
Mhm.
place of parent.
Of the parents, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So they were the oldest conservatories were like the parents of the orphans.
Right.
They
Yeah.
they whereas the Paris Conservatory was more like a modern conservatory. It was almost like a business,
Right.
and
Yes.
it was like a product.
Yeah.
And if the product was not very good, they would get rid of it.
Yeah.
So
I don't know. I don't know when the conservatory in Italy really changed, but when I was in the conservatory, I know that we complained that the programs that we were following were still from 1910.
yes, probably, yeah.
Were very old programs, and I don't know when it changed, but it was more similar to the French conservatory at that point, you know.
Yes. The Conservatory in Milan
Yeah.
became more famous than Naples in the second half of the 19th century.
Yeah.
And they adopted the Paris Conservatory ways because that was the most famous conservatory then. And then also, after Italian independence, Naples was downgraded a little bit.
Right. Yeah. Still is. Yes. Yes. Yes.
But yeah, it was very difficult. So, for example, Claude Debussy was a very, very good pianist, but there were each year there would be a contest in the spring or early summer to determine your grade for the year.
Right.
And there were about 6 grades, but they weren't letter grades. They were you could get, for example, a third honorable mention, or a second honorable mention, or a first honorable mention, and then you could get a first, second, or third prize.
Yeah.
Maybe not a third prize, but certainly first or second prize.
Yeah.
Well, Debussy, for example, got up to a second prize. And then the next year, he didn't do any better. And so he was expelled from the piano class.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was really cruel. In fact, if a teacher's students couldn't get a first prize ever, and if too many of them were like that, then they got rid of the teacher.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was really cold. But yes, the Italian conservatories eventually shifted over toward the Paris model.
Yeah. So it's very interesting how this kind of all these things are done mirrored in the music that we know, right? By kind of the great composers. And then when you start analyzing really, and then kind of cutting down things, and then looking at the small schemas, you say, oh yeah, that's what is happening, right? And if somebody would like to learn now schemas in partimenti and and learn how to write in the Gallant style, how would you start? How would you suggest?
I would start with a talented teacher like you. No, but really, there aren't that many teachers that can do these things or know how to do these things. It's a tradition that almost entirely died out. It stayed more alive in Italy, and in France, it's still there is still a tradition like this. Not exactly like Italy, but there's a French tradition that's still very strong. So a beginner should probably have a good teacher, and then you can go to a website, partimenti.org. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
And all of these old lessons are there for free.
Yeah.
So it's possible to teach yourself a little bit.
Right.
And then the people that are interested in partimenti and improvising classical music are a small international group, but they're very friendly and happy to help people.
Right. Yeah.
So you don't always have to have expensive lessons. Sometimes it's possible just to speak with somebody who knows a lot about it. And then
it would be so interesting if really kind of music teachers, and kind of instrumental teachers, even those that give private lessons would start using a little bit more of those schemas and patterns, because then even the students, even when you are, for example, my students have a notebook, and we often just copy the left hand of a piece that the students had already played, and I said, okay, so now let's see what sounds good. If you change the right hand, if you kind of start adding a little bit more, if you kind of then start analyzing where is it going, is it a 1 and 5 in the key of C, right? What is that note? And I start writing even just the circles. And I have little ones, 6 years old, who can just like take a chain etude, like copy the chords the left hand, and then kind of improvise it the right, or take a Mozart minuet, just copy the left hand, change the right, and then start kind of adding your own left hand and your own right hand, and start modifying things in order that it sounds like nice.
And even beginners can do this now. Like a super talent like Alma Deutscher. I mean, I remember once I had her study 2 different Bach fugues from the Well-Tempered Clavier. And I pointed out that, you remember this idea of monte and ponte and fonte, that, when you get to the double bar, do one of these things. Well, Bach uses those patterns in one fugue, and he uses a different pattern in another fugue. Mm-hmm. And so, or maybe it was 2 different places in the same fugue. I think that's what it was. And so I said, well, play this fugue, but now switch the patterns. In other words, use this other pattern in the place where, if there's patterns A and B, play the B pattern with
and then
the A. And she could do it, which was really quite amazing. But but even making small changes, for example, in Mozart's time, when you took a repeat in a sonata, very often they played it slightly differently. It was expected. The idea was, well, why would I play it twice exactly the same? They would say, well, that's stupid. Why do that?
I always ask myself the question, why should I repeat this entire thing again? And then you start forgetting, because was it the first time or the second time? Did I already play that or not, right?
Yes, no, there's a series of pieces. I mean, you know this, but I'm sort of speaking for your listeners. There's a series of pieces by C.P.E. Bach, the oldest surviving son of J.S. Bach, and they're called Pieces with Varied Repeats. And the idea was that professional musicians, they know how to change something when you repeat, but amateur musicians don't. So Bach said, I'll write out the variation for them. There's no double bars. You don't repeat anything because each part is written out twice, completely written out. So it's a wonderful thing, and I think it makes classical music more creative and more personal.
I think we have lost a little bit that aspect of learning music. So the art of really writing music and kind of knowing really the language. So right now, when we learn an instrument, we just learn how to play the piece, read the notes, play the piece, and that's it. Right, and that's kind of very reductive, compared to what we could do.
We have YouTube now, and so if a young, let's say a young lady learns a Mozart sonata and she plays it quite well, she can go to YouTube and she can listen to people play it so beautifully that she will never be able to equal them.
Right.
That's discouraging.
Yes.
But if she makes some changes to it and adds little things of her own, then she's doing something that's never happened before, and now it's really hers,
Yeah.
I think there should be Olympic sport on classical improvisation.
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of it in jazz music, right? In pop music, they do that all
Exactly.
the time, right? And then
That's
we have
right.
lost that art of composing classical music, or really kind of just
Yes.
like improvising on
You know,
something.
in the first half of the 20th century, many of the greatest performers, especially keyboard performers,
Yeah.
could improvise quite well.
Yeah.
And sometimes they were caught on radio improvising a little bit. I think it was Joseph Levine,
Yeah.
or either he or Hoffman, I can't remember, maybe Hoffman. Um, he would he would modulate from one piece to the other. If he ended a piece in G major, and if the next piece was in E flat major, he felt like he had to sort of improvise his way into the new key. And then he would.
Yeah, once I was at the concert with Lazar Berman in Italy, and he played the Mephisto Waltz by Liszt, and all of a sudden the middle part was different. And I knew the piece because I was practicing that myself, and I was like, I don't know this part. What's that? But yeah.
There's a YouTube video of Arthur Rubinstein,
right,
who gets lost in a Chopin Polonaise.
yeah.
And he just makes it up for a while until he can remember how to
Remember
get
where was I? Nobody will notice unless you know the piece. But yeah, we lost that thing, and I think we become at one point we become fixated to it. We need to play exactly as it's written to respect the composer, whatever else. But then we have lost the art of really writing our own music and learning our own music.
And most young music students will never become a professional musician.
Right.
And even if they do become a professional musician, it would still be nice for them to do things that please only themselves.
Yeah. Yes.
A professional musician is really working for the audience.
Yes.
And so they don't have complete freedom to do what they want.
Mm-hmm.
Also, there are some professionals now who improvise for every concert. Gabriela Montero.
Yeah.
She finishes her concerts with improvisations.
Yeah, why not? It is not. It's an. We wrote those rules, and I don't know. I always think that Franz Liszt invented the recital form, right? But then he was the one who was improvising at the piano.
Exactly. Yeah.
Why should I play then Liszt pieces as he has written if he was the first one who was improvising? Right?
And if an audience has paid the money and gone to the trouble to go to the concert, then if they hear a very nice improvisation, then they've got something that no one else ever had.
Right. Yes.
And so they can really feel like that they've heard something special.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot to be said for it. I mean, I started learning how to improvise classical music too late. So
it's not so natural at one point, right?
Not so natural. And I'm an adagio improviser.
Right. Yeah.
If I try any fast tempo, my brain doesn't keep up with what I'm doing.
But I'm using music in the Galant style, so for myself. And so now every day I kind of sat down a little bit, 1 hour of my time. It's just like to write down one of the different patterns and schemas and then put them together in a different way. And then I take that pattern and I give that to my students to improvise. And the nice thing was that I had a little one. It's a little German student that I have here, and so I gave her a Romanesca to kind of write the melody on top of this. And then what she did was she forgot that she had already written that. And I said, oh, you forgot the piece of music, so let's do it again. So she wrote a very different melody. And at the end of the lesson, we found that past sheet of music. And I was like, oh, you wrote two. Now you wrote two pieces. And they were very different, same pattern, but very, very different pieces. So it was beautiful for her too. Now she has two pieces that she has written, she has composed. And it's very natural.
Yeah. She's lucky to be learning this way. At Christmas time, when I'm teaching young students, This is a Romanesca.
Right.
Or a Monte.
Right. 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 Yes.
And, then a little light bulb goes on that they think, oh, I know that.
Yes. Yes.
It's
It is a
something
pattern.
familiar.
Yeah. Anyway, we lost that. My best friend has so he improvises on the guitar. He plays pop rock music, does things, and he always told me, "Why don't you sit in the piano, just repeat things, change things that you already know?" And I was like, "I'm a concert pianist, but I don't know how to do those things." And he does that all the time because the way that they learn, rock pop music it gives more freedom to,
That's right.
really kind of use these patterns and modify the patterns in a way that it is yours at one point. And we have lost that. And as a concert pianist myself, I just feel always uncomfortable in sitting down and play a pattern because I don't know the patterns. I just know how to read the music, memorize the music, play it. And I feel like I'm limited in that thing. So that's what I don't want my students, for example, to feel, right? They should feel like, oh, okay, I can play my own music and can do it. So is there a kind of the easiest way to really kind of, the easiest thing that somebody would have to say, you said, to go to partimento.org, but really kind of a suggestion for my audience, how to kind of start really kind of.
Sure. For a complete beginner,
Yes.
I would go to partimenti.org and then click on Partimenti, and then click at the bottom of the page on About Partimenti.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
And then there are a series of files that are for beginners and to teach things like the rule of the octave or cadences, and talk a little bit about the history of it. And then for a lot of people, the next step would be the Partimenti of Furno, Furno. And for that, they would just go to partimenti.org, Partimenti, and then find Furno on that page.
Yes.
Yeah, and they have there's exercises for every topic, and then at the back of the book, I've written out how you might play them if you're stuck, if you can't figure out how to play. So it's sort of like the answers are in the back of the textbook.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's a good thing because you can always try and then double check.
And I would say that the exercises of Furno are not very musically interesting, but they're very easy for beginners.
Right. Yes.
And then after Furno, you could go to Fenaroli, who has 6 levels of his Partimenti.
Yeah.
The first level has figures, so you understand which intervals to play. And then the second level does too. The third level is learning about suspensions, counterpoint, that sort of thing. The fourth level, there's no figures. You have to just understand the bass.
Yes.
And then the fifth and sixth levels are ridiculously difficult, but they're ridiculously difficult if you come at them from not understanding this.
Right. If you haven't done the previous levels.
But if you work your way up, they are doable.
Awesome.
And then beyond that would be the Partimenti of Durante. The files for beginners say what I've just said.
Yeah.
So you don't have to remember what I'm saying, but if you just go, it's fine. About Partimenti, it's sort of there. For example, one of the files is called A Beginner's Guide.
Yeah.
And so by the time you finish working through these, you can really improvise 18th century music.
Yeah.
And then in the section not called harmony, but not called Partimenti, but called harmony, that's the French style.
Right.
The French called Partimenti, well, sometimes they did call them Partimenti. It's amazing that they used the Italian word.
Yeah.
But other times they just called them given basses or given melodies. You'd be given a bass, and then you'd harmonize it.
Yeah.
So there's several years worth of work on that website.
Yes.
And it goes clear off the chart. I mean, the difficult exercises from the Paris Conservatory at the end of the 19th century, or the melodies and basses given by Nikolai Arensky to Rachmaninoff at the Moscow Conservatory are seriously difficult.
Yeah, I assume so, knowing their music. Yes.
Yes, but they're very interesting. And again, if you work your way up, you can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Again, it's helpful to have a teacher if you get stuck.
Yeah. So I suggest everybody to read your book, Music in the Gallant Style, which is very useful, to at least understand really kind of the basic concepts of how the schemas and patterns work. And then to read this one, right? Child composers in the old conservatories. And it's a very, very interesting book from an historical perspective, but also,
Yes,
and then I like that. Yeah, and also kind of it's also very interesting that you have all the examples on YouTube that you can go and just like download and listen to them. So yeah, thank you so much for being with us today, and it was a pleasure talking to you. And so I hope we can have a conversation later, maybe in a few months or a few weeks.
Well, thank you. I've enjoyed it very much, and I just envy you. I wish I'd had a teacher like you when I was a little boy. I
wish I would have had a teacher when I was little, so to teach me those things, so I wouldn't be struggling with kind of knowing now what I didn't know.
Thank you very much. Goodbye now.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.